are joined by Joseph Rezwin, actor and filmmaker who just presented the movie called Gazzara, about Ben Gazzara, at IndieLisboa of 2013. How are you, Joseph?
I'm fine. I'm very good, thank you.
Did you enjoy the presentation over here in Lisbon?
Yes, this is the first time I've been in Lisbon, my wife and I, my wife Eileen, who did the music for the film. And this is our first time in Lisbon because we live in Paris. I'm from the States. My wife's from Scotland, but we live in Paris for many, many years. It's the first time here in Lisbon, and it's just we fell in love.
Fantastic. Come back anytime you want. What drew you initially to Ben, initially and throughout the years as well?
Well, I first met Ben on the set of Opening Night, which is a film by John Cassavetes, and I got to know him and Cassavetes, and I stayed in touch with Ben over the years, and I wanted to do a film with him in the 90s, which he accepted to do, a fiction film, and we had everything ready to go, and then at the last minute, you know, it didn't work out. So I decided I wanted to make a film with him. Yeah.
But about him, like getting to know the Ben's characteristics, which were very special, weren't they?
Well, I'm not a documentary filmmaker, and I don't even consider Gazzara to be a documentary. It's like a story for me. I didn't particularly want to do a film about Ben, but because we had no money, and I wanted to work with him, I thought this would be the cheapest kind of film we could make, and I thought then he'd be interested since it would be a movie about him. And that way he might accept it, but I told him it would be about him, but also about us, you know, but mostly about him. Yeah. And he said to me, I called him. He was in Italy, and I explained the idea to him very quickly, and he said, "Oh, it could be interesting, you know, especially since it was about him."
Yes, but he still posed himself as a person who, not having been possibly as on the forefront as I mean as popular as some other of his contemporaries, still this was a star. Like he was, everyone knows Ben Gazzara, so I don't mean that it wasn't well known. Of course he was, but I mean I'm talking, you know, the major, you know, film. It's difficult to explain, but I think you know what I mean. Like the Marlon Brando or the Steve McQueen, even if he passed away very early on. But everyone knew Ben Gazzara. But the kind of behavior he had. My point is, the kind of behavior he had was like, he was a star. Like some people have that sort of way about them, don't they?
Yeah, no, he was a star. He wasn't a big box office star, like, as you said, like
Paul Newman, for instance.
Like Paul Newman. And oddly enough, interesting about Paul Newman, Ben Gazzara played the first Brick, which is a character in Cat on the Hot Tin Roof, the Tennessee Williams play, and he did it on Broadway. He was the first one. He created the role, and he was going to do the movie, and then at the last minute, the director of the film, I think, was George Cukor, big Hollywood director, and he at the last minute decided not to do it, and so Ben was out, and Paul Newman got the part. But Ben knew Paul Newman because they went to the actor studio together, and he knew Steve McQueen, and he also used to see Brando, and that's also in the film, all that stuff. But yeah, because Ben was in the actor studio in New York in 1951, right at the beginning. And so it was Elia Kazan chose Ben and Tennessee Williams to be on to play the role of Brick on Broadway in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Yeah. So, but as you say, Ben is known, and he was certainly known in Hollywood, and he was known by many, many people. He had many fans, but he did a lot of he did big films, but I think his best work is on the stage, and also you know, in the smaller films that he did, especially with John Cassavetes. Yeah, and he said that to me once. He said he remembered the films where he didn't get paid a lot of money. The movies where he got paid a lot of money, he forgot.
The film is really emotionally engaging. I thought while watching it, and I really was touched by the way that you put across the relation, I mean the conversation really, with Ben, and how Ben opened up to you while you were shooting. Did you find it's particularly surprising the way that in which he did so?
Not really. In fact, I wasn't even thinking about that. I was so worried just about, dealing with Ben Gazzara, and because he was a force of nature, that's for sure. And he did open up. He did open up very quickly to me, and as considering that we weren't really friends, we had contact over the years, but we weren't really friends. We came to know each other actually better through the making of this film. But somewhere I think that Ben may have felt that it was going to be one of his last films, and maybe that's why he opened up. And also, I don't think anyone actually made a film like that on him before. He'd done many interviews, but that wasn't the kind of picture I wanted to make anyway. I didn't want to do that kind of film. And he didn't want to do that kind of film, and I wanted our relationship to also be involved in the film as well. Yes. And I think that he kind of played the role, the father role, and I played the son role, and he was Ben and I was Joe, But we wonder sometimes, is he acting Ben or is he being Ben?
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to know.
Yeah.
I still don't know.
And possibly never will, really, because looking at the film, that's exactly what happens. You actually kind of mention it during the film, but so it's kind of meta. So, but it is totally. But for instance, there are some instances in which meta things happen as well. Like, for instance, the editing. Like, some editing reveals itself explicitly by language, by verbal language, I mean, after it has happened. For instance, the cutaway thing. I was laughing really because I also edit videos. So I was it cut away from with Ben's agent, I think,
with his lawyer Jay Julian. Yeah, he was directing us. He often did that anyway. So, when you're working with an actor. I think it was Arthur Penn, actually, who said this, the great Arthur Penn, great director, who said, when you have great actors, the best thing to do is just to get out of their way and let them act. And I had no choice with Ben, so I just let him go and made it part of the film. And somehow it works out, and sometimes you don't know how. Sometimes the shot works out and seems to correspond with what he's saying, and because that particular shot you're talking about, that happened in one shot where he was talking about the inserts and the cutaways, and it just happened. I don't know how. That's the magic,
They've been around basically, and but basically it's either the magic and also a lot of training. Like, they put themselves in that position, really, isn't it? Like, they know how to be in tune with what's about to happen, isn't it? I find that with music a lot, like reacting to the necessities of the work that's being made, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Ben was a complete professional. He knew exactly. Even when we were outside shooting, and he would make sure that he would move into the light for us, playing his light, and I didn't have to tell him that, and I would watch my shadow on him. So he knew what to do, and everything he did in the film, I think he was aware of the camera. He knew what he was doing. I think he knew. Yeah. In fact, I'm sure he knew.
And do you believe, while watching the movie, I was thinking, and we've had a chance to talk about this briefly already, but during the film, I was thinking that this was a sort of exposure that seems to me that is it's becoming a sought out for thing, I believe. Like, for instance, in comedy, people, comedians are searching for or trying to present brutal honesty about themselves and about and in conversation as well. There are some podcasts reflecting very intimate things, and I believe your movie is in the same vein of sort. Now, I'm not trying to include you in any movement. I'm just saying, because obviously I don't think there is one in terms of filmmaking. But do you feel that this was your intention, to be beyond honest, almost?
Well, I wanted to be honest, obviously, and you try to be honest about what you're doing, and you try to like what you're doing. I don't know how you could make a film and not like it. If what would it look like?
Yeah.
It would be horrible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's not always easy, especially, again, when you're working with a force of nature like Ben. But I did want it to be honest. I wasn't sure, what we had. I personally, I think the film is unique in some way because it's as I say, people call it a documentary, but it's not really a documentary in the classic sense. I know, for example, with the clips, the film clips, I didn't want to use the film clips in a traditional way where you talk about a film and then see the clip. And I wanted the clips to be part of the story, and I think we were able to achieve that in the film,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so, but I was surprised. We had a lot of footage. We shot a lot, and it took me a couple of months before I could actually look at everything. And then it was a real experience. I'd never edited a film in that way before. Mm-hmm. The film was structured. I had a structure when we started, but the actual dialogue between Ben and I is improvised. And some of it looks like it was written.
Yes.
I don't know how that happened.
But I was actually going to ask you that. How much footage did you end up with?
We had about.
This was like 2 days, right? Of shooting.
No.
Oh, 3.
No. We shot for almost 10 days.
Oh, really?
Yeah, with Ben.
Oh, okay.
But I was in New York for a month, and also there was a lot of footage of me that I didn't use, and there was a lot of footage on Ben. I don't know. We had maybe 30 hours of footage on Ben that we shot on the Red camera. So it was a choice, and we were very careful when we were cutting the film to find the story, make sure that the story was coming through, that we weren't repeating things, that we weren't just using a scene just for information. And today with YouTube and everything else, if people want to find out about somebody, they can go on the internet and they can find out everything they want to know and look at all his film clips and and so I thought, well, we don't need to do that, and so it was a challenge to cut the film. I had never cut a film in that way before. I'd never made a film like this before, because everything else that I do, I write, because I'm a writer basically, and then I'm also a director and an actor. And I direct my films, and sometimes it's difficult because I have to fight with the writer, but who's me. Yeah. But I send him off to Brazil, and that way he doesn't bother me when I'm the director.
You must have a lot of emails back and forth between yourself.
Yeah, a lot of schizophrenic emails. Yeah.
And people do that, actually. It's not even that weird. Come to think of it, people actually. I know people who email themselves as reminders. So sometimes, actually, I'll tell you that. Like, a friend of mine actually emails himself in writing. I mean, I'm sorry. It's like he will remind himself, but like as if he were talking to himself. So it's very schizophrenic like that.
Well, when you're a writer-director, it's schizophrenic, and to be an actor as well, that's even worse. And in this film, I was the actor with Ben, as well as the director and the writer of it. Where I would say that I conceived it, and as I said, we structured it. But I didn't know what Ben was going to come up with, and he'd say to me, "Tell me what we're doing today," and then the next day he'd say, "Don't tell me anything." It was always back and forth, and actors are like that sometimes. Sometimes they don't want to know what's going on, so that they're spontaneous, and then other days they want to know what's going on. So it's constant. You know, I remember the day we were going to shoot in Radio City Music Hall. I spoke to Ben on the phone, and Ben said, "Well, Joey, what should I wear? Radio City is red and gold." So I said to him, "Well, don't wear red and don't wear gold. You know, otherwise you'll be invisible." So.
Exactly. But the movie also makes a lot of interesting points. One of which is, for instance, Julian Schnabel says, "I'm drawn to." Not drawn to fame, but I'm drawn to to famous people. I'm drawn to talented people. Sometimes it's something people forget, really. Like that it should be like that, isn't it? Like, do you feel that for instance, in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's about the work, and the problem is because it's the business. You know, I think it was Orson Welles who said that. He said, people think the movie business is all about money because they're always talking about money. And it is a lot about money, but it's also about ego, because there's a lot of egos, you know. So, yeah, that's a part of the film business, which is, it's not easy sometimes. It's the money part, you know. You spend 90% of your life trying to get money and 10% of your life hustling, you know, creating, you know. So it's, but that's what it's about. That's why we're doing it, for the work, you know. And then to make the film, and then to show the film, and get the response. That's what we're doing it for. And then the rest is the business, you know.
And speaking of talent, also being around when you had a chance to walk around with Ben in New York City and meet and talk to all the other those talented people. Ben's friends and things like that. When, for instance, when you were at the actor studio, I was thinking, well, this is the idea I have of places like New York or London or Paris or any cultural. It happens in Lisbon as well, but it's smaller, in a smaller way. Which is, this is the place where the big things are made. You know, like it's not a question of big; it's a question of importance. It's not a question of size; it's a question of importance. So, like, this is where the magic is happening. You know, do you feel that like there's some sort of rarefied air of talent, of being around people like Ben, or being around people who, like, just the fact that you're there kind of makes things work.
Well, I don't know for sure. I mean, I've been in New York, I've been in California, I live in Paris, and, you know, my feeling is that magic you're talking about can happen anywhere. I think the thing about New York was important to Ben, and that period of the Actors Studio in the early 50s was a period that we'll never see again, that's for sure. But then every generation there's another period, you know, and the older generation says, oh, it was better back then, and the younger generation says, well, maybe, but, you know, so I don't know if that's true. There is a magic to some places, you know, but New York has changed too, you know, just like every other city, and there are great things going on, and then there's not so great things going on, just like everywhere. And I would imagine that in Portugal and in a city like Lisbon or in other cities, there are very talented people who are doing things. Maybe we don't know about them yet because they're underground, you know. But it's the same in France. I know that there are talented people in music and in painting and in film, you know, and we just haven't heard about them yet because they haven't been covered by the media, you know. But there's a lot covered by the media that isn't so great either, you know, as you probably know.
Yeah, exactly. So. Exactly. So do you feel like there's anyone really that is carrying that, you know, is carrying the torch really now in terms of acting to your personal taste, like in the younger generation?
Oh, there's so many great actors, you know. There's there's different generations. There's a generation of the actors now in their 40s, you know, Sean Penn and Matt Dillon, and there's a lot of those actors around, that generation. And then there are new actors coming up, you know, all the time. You know, the thing that what I think is is always difficult, and the basis is the writing. You know, where are the writers? And they're there. They're out there as well. But I think that's what's important: is the writing, the storytelling. But then film is changing as well. You know, film is changing, and the media is changing, and the distribution is changing. But I still think that somewhere people do like narrative stories where they can get to know the characters. And I think the proof of that is in all these series that are very successful. From many of them come from America. You know, big television series, you know, episodic television, where the acting is really good and the writing is good. You know, that to me is proof that people still like that kind of film. You know, even though that's not a film, but
it kind of is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a huge. The arcs are huge. I mean, aren't they? Like the seasons are very, very long, and they run forever, really, don't they?
Yeah, they run forever. You know, I guess until they can't do it anymore. You know, until they're fed up. You know, but yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there. You know, and in film as well. You know, but just like in every generation, you know, film is very old, right? It's over 100 years old. So if we looked at all the films that have been made since the beginning, I'm sure most of them, you know, are not very interesting. You know, it's the ones that stick out we remember because they had something. You know, but there's always a younger generation. I think your generation and even younger than you, who appreciate what came before and they embrace it, whether it's in music, you know, like jazz, or in film. You know, and they go back and they study the old directors, and then they get something from them, and then they change it, you know, and make it theirs, you know. So, you know,
Which is also another thing that is in your movie as well. Like it ends with. Well, it's not. I don't mean to spoil things, but you know, absolutely not. But
don't say the ending.
Ever.
Don't never do that.
I hate actually saying anything about anything, you know, because it's actually one of the things that I really enjoyed about movies. That I was told I went to see the movie with friends, and people were, and they told me, oh, it's a movie about Ben Gazzara walking around New York and describing his life and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, let's. That's all I knew. I didn't expect it to be like this, you know, such a revealing, you know. And it was basically, you know, even if you had structure, it was two people who like each other being human, and that's commendable, you know.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. No, that's a great compliment. Yeah. No, that is, you know, and it's a journey, it's a voyage, and those are the kind of movies I like, you know, as a spectator, and yeah, I like movies that are human, and there's no, you know, there's something that's authentic there, you know, and we're not trying to fool anybody, you know. Also, I think the movie's very funny. People, yes. I don't know if you found it funny, but I think it's very funny, and that's important as well. You know, it's also very touching and profound. It's got everything in it, you know. So, I guess we were lucky. You know?
Thank you very much, Joseph, for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you.